The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 171. Did Kiran love money? Of course not. He would not spare the three big families even if they gave him all of their money. He just wanted to make their lives a living hell to avenge his family. He wanted to provoke them so they would strike back before the end of the week, disrupting their plan. He initially wanted Rain to enter Peace Pharmaceuticals to dig out information, but that was not necessary anymore. Now he was going to make the three major families lose their minds. So he brought Rain back to Xander Corporation. When the receptionist saw Kiran's gloomy face and how battered Rain was, he proceeded to press the elevator button without a word. Kiran carried Rain upstairs and into Snow's office. When Snow saw Rain's swollen face, she jumped up in shock. What happened? Evelyn and her classmates beat her up at the entrance of Peace Pharmaceuticals. Kiran carried her into a room and treated her wounds. Snow asked someone to go out and buy some clothes for Rain. Although it was the second time Rain was being treated by Kiran, she was embarrassed when he was now doing it in front of Snow. On the contrary, Kiran acted normally the entire time, without a single wicked thought crossing his mind. After her wound had been taken care of, he gave her a massage and put her to sleep. Then Kiran and Snow walked out of the room. Snow looked at Kiran. How did you take care of it? I killed 4 of Henry's bodyguards. I was going to kill Evelyn too, but Yvonne was protecting her with her life, so I didn't. Then I asked Henry to tell the other families to send over 5 billion before 6 o'clock, or else 3 members in each family will die. Kiran spoke calmly and mercilessly. Snow's eyes widened and her lips parted in shock. We have to take action in order to get revenge. We can't just do nothing, Kiran said. Can you do it alone? Snow looked at him worriedly. Are you scared? Kiran laughed. Snow finally nodded. So you're afraid of becoming a widow? Kiran teased her to get her to relax. Go to hell. Snow did not think Kiran would say that when she was genuinely worried, and it annoyed her. Fine, I'll go die then. Kiran stepped out. Snow was even more angry, but she did not chase after him because she knew he had stuff to do. After leaving, Kiran went straight to Bayville Hotel. At the Zieglers, Henry, Alfred, and Theodore sat together. The tea brewing in front of them was fragrant, but no one drank it as they were not in the mood. Alfred and Theodore felt like a surprise had fallen from the skies. One might think that they had won the lottery, but in reality they were struck with huge debt. How could they not be mad? I'll go make a call, Alfred said. Henry and Theodore nodded expectantly, especially Henry. Tell them that we want to kill Kiran now, and we can't wait a minute longer. Alfred ignored him and dialed the number before speaking politely. Hello! Kiran threw a fit today, and wait for just 2 more days, they insisted. When Henry heard that through the speakerphone, he suddenly became furious. I can't wait any longer. I must kill Kiran now. Then go kill him yourself, they hung up right away. Beep, beep. The dial tone was all they heard. The 3 of them were taken aback as they did not expect them to refuse so quickly. Damn it, they're abandoning us, Henry cursed. Theodore did not say a thing, but his eyes kept looking around. Ziegler's face was as gloomy as dark clouds. We must take precautions. If Kiran continues to do this every day, not only would we lose our property, but we will lose our lives. Henry looked at them and said worriedly. Ziegler's face became twisted. Fabian was humiliated. Zenith disappeared. And Helena and Barry died because of Kiran. Kiran was like a killer on the loose. However, he has not reached his limit yet. He was torturing them slowly. If this went on, they would all be dead within 3 months. After giving it some thought, Theodore opened his mouth. My niece, Tina, said that when they were at Snow's place yesterday, Kiran told Snow's friends that they would not have to worry about money when they were with him. Alfred and Henry were shocked by that information, yet it piqued their interest. The Marsh family wants Dragon's Mount, so I asked Tina to befriend Snow, Theodore explained. What you're saying is that Kiran has no one to help him, which is why he's using brute force. Theodore nodded. That's right. I think we have 3 viable options now. What are they? Henry was impatient. First, we give him 5 billion today and wait for them to kill Kiran 2 days later. I can't give him that money, Henry flat out refused. Alfred was annoyed. Let him finish. Henry shut up. Theodore continued. In that case, we can let Kiran take over our company so he can manage them. Then, not only would he need the manpower, but he'd be distracted too. What if he wants the money? Henry asked. Then, we'll use the second method and give him money, Theodore said. Give him money? Alfred and Henry asked. Yes. We give him money and put our properties on sale. There's no way he'll turn it down. Theodore smiled sinisterly. Alfred and Henry were overjoyed as well. Then Henry asked hurriedly, what about the third method? We hire someone and pay them handsomely to kill Kiran, Theodore said coldly. I like the last option, but I don't have much confidence that we'd find such a person, Henry said. Alfred also nodded sadly. Even those professional bodyguards were nothing compared to Kiran. I'm afraid that no ordinary human is a match for him. Then, we'll go with the second plan. We'll give Kiran the money and deal with our property. That way, Kiran will fall into our trap, said Theodore. Great. The three of them nodded in agreement. After discussing the details, they left to collect the money. Meanwhile, Kiran made his way to Bayville Hotel. Good day, Mr. York. The receptionist happened to be the staff member who had given him his very important person membership card the day before. So he greeted Kiran enthusiastically. Is your manager here? Kiran asked coldly. The receptionist was stunned and he nodded robotically. Yes. Which room? Room 999. Kiran pressed the elevator button and went upstairs. The receptionist was still confused, so he quickly dialed Yvonne's office. Chapter 172. What is it? Yvonne's complexion was not great. She sat in her seat and grimaced in pain. Miss Yvonne, Mr. York went upstairs looking for you, said the receptionist immediately. Kiran is here. Yvonne jumped up. Creak! Her door was pushed open, and Kiran walked in. Yvonne quickly hung up the phone and looked at Kiran with confused eyes. She could feel her self-esteem being destroyed when Kiran called her a sick patient. You are the manager of Bayville Hotel, Kiran said softly. What? Do you want it? It's yours, Yvonne said with a poker face. I'm not interested, Kiran said. Ha! What are you interested in then? If you're interested in my body, I can give it to you now. Yvonne unzipped her jacket, revealing the white Chanel dress he gave her yesterday. Wearing that dress used to bring her joy. Now, all she felt was shame. Kiran was still composed. I'm not interested in your body. My wife is prettier than you. Yvonne almost suffocated to death as she felt like her chest was stuffed with cotton balls. She had never heard anything so absurd. Whatever you have to say to me, just say it. You're a smart girl. Kiran walked to the window and looked outside before continuing. The outside world is great, but your world is filthy. Shut up, you have no right to judge me, Yvonne retorted in anger. Her sickly face became even paler and her chest was constantly rising and falling. Kiran's filthy description gave her butterflies. She had been ill the past few years, but she was still a pure and innocent woman. Kiran was the only man who managed to touch her heart. This was the same man who called her a sick patient and dirty. He insulted her and shamed her big time. Then Kiran looked at Yvonne indifferently. Drugs are pumping in your blood. Doesn't that make you contaminated? Yvonne was furious. She did not think Kiran was talking about drugs. She was embarrassed, as it was a misunderstanding. The drugs she had taken over the years did indeed contaminate her blood. She glared at Kiran, trying to figure out what he was implying. At Peace Pharmaceuticals, he slapped her mercilessly and mocked her. Why did it seem like he was flirting with her now? The thing that annoyed her was the fact that she was so easily swayed by Kiran, and she fell for him every time. Kiran looked at Yvonne's dazed expression and smiled devilishly. Yvonne's eyes looked as if an inexplicable urge had taken over her. However, she quickly came to her senses when she was reminded of the enmity between the York and Quinn families. She stared back at him. You don't have much time left because of your illness, but you sure don't take death lightly. What a pity. Kiran shook his head and sighed with a mocking expression. Kiran, what do you want to do? Yvonne was triggered by his humiliation. You want to know what I want to do? Kiran asked. Yes, if it's nothing, then get out. Yvonne suppressed her feelings for Kiran and shouted. Looking at you, I suddenly think that you could be very valuable to me, said Kiran with interest. Yvonne's emotions were all over the place. How so? Your life. I can increase or shorten your life. Are you interested in making a deal with me? Kiran asked. Yvonne's eyes showed a hint of joy at the hope that she could be cured. However, it soon disappeared when she looked at him. "You're doing this to make me retaliate against the Quinn family and the other two families, but I'd rather suffer and die." Kiran shook his head. "You're thinking too much. I'm giving you a chance." "What chance?" Yvonne was curious. Kiran said, "Remember when I asked for money in exchange for your lives this morning?" Yvonne nodded. "Of course. From now on, I will not only keep you alive, but I'll keep another member of the Quinn family alive for every 100 million you make me," said Kiran. Chapter 173. You. Yvonne thought of how she was going to make money. "Even if my life depends on it, I'm not that kind of woman." "What kind of woman are you talking about?" Kiran was stunned. "Aren't you trying to make me earn money?" Yvonne was disappointed in Kiran. "Theft." Kiran was amused. "Did you think you can make 100 million by selling your body?" "First, Yvonne knew that she had misunderstood, and she was so embarrassed she almost cursed. "How about you use Peace Pharmaceuticals to help me acquire all the business in Bayville?" Kiran asked Yvonne. Yvonne's face was flushed. "Are you sure you'll spare a Quinn family member if I earn 100 million? "Of course. Kiran will never lie to a woman." "Fine deal. I'm telling you, if you lie to me, I won't let you get away with it." Yvonne looked at Kiran and said firmly, "Don't worry about it." Kiran agreed readily before saying, "I'll help treat you so you're not in so much pain. It'll be a waste for your perfect body to be wrapped in a puffer jacket." What a waste of a beautiful dress, too. Yvonne blushed and looked at the dress she was wearing. It was indeed very beautiful, but her skin was numb and cold to the touch. If not for trying to seduce Kiran, she would have put on her jacket long ago. "Do I need to take my clothes off?" Yvonne said boldly. "No need. I know all your measurements. What's there to see?" Kiran said frankly. Yvonne had once again been stabbed in the chest. "Lie down on the sofa. I'll give you a massage and acupuncture." Kiran gave her orders. Yvonne's heart palpitated nervously, but she did as she was told. She lay on the sofa and tugged at her dress to cover herself up for fear of flashing him. It was too bad that Kiran did not even glance over, as if he did not even have the slightest interest. Yvonne was disappointed. Was she not as good as snow? Kiran gently pressed on the pressure points of her body. Yvonne felt as if her frozen body was cracking open. She felt a sharp pain, but soon a wave of comfort washed over her. Kiran's hands started to work faster and harder, and Yvonne felt even more relaxed. It was a feeling she had never experienced before. After Kiran massaged her for 10 minutes, he did acupuncture on her for an hour. He was exhausted too. There were beads of sweat on his forehead. Yvonne's body was weak, her meridian points were blocked, and it was even more tiring to cure the symptoms instead of just the root cause. Yvonne felt as if 100 pounds had been lifted off her. She looked at Kiran happily. "Don't overthink it. You're just my part-timer," Kiran said coldly. The joy in her heart dissipated, to be replaced with anger. Kiran then stood up. "Remember to start acquiring properties for me in Bayville." Then he left. He did not have anyone at his disposal in Bayville. Not to mention, with the 3 big families fear-mongering in Bayville, it was even harder for him to get help. Yesterday, after he scared off Crystal and the girls, they all left the group chat when they got home. Ridiculously enough, only he, Snow, and Serena were left. Today, he came up with the idea of asking Yvonne to help part-time. Firstly, he would borrow the Quinn family's power. Secondly, he would make the Ziegler family and the Marsh family upset at the Quinn family, causing a civil war. Most importantly, if the 3 families cause chaos, the Bayville market will crash, which will lead to their downfall. Yvonne was a clever chess piece. He did not expect her to become his perfect part-timer either. Kiran returned to Xander Corporation to look for Serena. Chapter 174. Lilting music, faint feminine fragrance, and the aroma of coffee wafted in the air. It was almost like a paradise of pleasure and solace for men. Inside the room, Serena was dressed in a standard women's suit, but her legs were clad in black stockings. The bright light reflected off them, making her slender legs appear even more delicate, as if they could be grasped in one hand. Her beauty and allure would stoke any man's urge to pin her against the wall. When Kiran pushed the door open, she beamed at him. "You're later than I expected." Kiran cocked a brow. "You knew I'd come here?" Of course, Serena answered confidently. Why? Kiran wanted to know. Because I'm hot. Serena laughed without a hint of shyness. Mr. Kiran, can't you let me be narcissistic for once? Her expression immediately turned petulant. She stood up and attached herself to Kiran's arm, leaning her body on him. Kiran did not shake her off. He knew that the more he refused her, the crazier she would become. Serena's heart leaped with joy. Men were like dams obstructing a river, but no matter how impenetrable they were, they would eventually be conquered by a woman's water-like tenderness. She believed that she could conquer Kiran with her charm. I have a favor to ask of you, said Kiran. You want to sleep with me? Serena simpered. It's my safe day. I can fulfill any demands you have. I can even. He. She stopped short and could not help but giggle at the dark look on Kiran's face. Get some reporters to inform Bayville's entire business world that something big's going to happen in front of the Xander Corporation building at 6 o'clock this evening, Kiran instructed. What big thing? Come on, let me in on the scoop before everyone else, Serena asked seriously. You'd better start making those calls now. Kiran spun on his heel to leave. You're being unfair, Mr. Kiran. You always come to me when you're up to no good, but you won't even grant this small wish of mine. Serena pouted. Kiran decided she had a point, so he said indifferently, I told the 3 big families to bring 30 billion each to me at 6 o'clock this evening, or 3 lives will be lost. Snap! Serena snapped her fingers. You're a real man! Even though I haven't slept with you, I know you're a real man! This female rogue. I'll be the baddest bitch for you, Mr. Real Man Kiran, Serena continued, looking at Kiran's exasperated face. He whirled around and stalked off, refusing to speak with this female rogue for another second. Mr. Kiran, if you ever decide to become a bad guy and look for another woman, I'll always be the first on your backup list, Serena shouted, laughing. Kiran felt like stopping and giving her the finger. However, he was afraid that she would pester him to give her more than the finger in the future. Serena watched Kiran escape in defeat with a blissful smile on her face. She had nothing but love for him. Moreover, Kiran was everything to her, and she was willing to do anything just to be with him. Mr. Kiran, you're mine. No, I'm yours. With a seductive glint in her eye, she took out her phone and started to make the arrangements. This reporter, her eyes lit up with a significant smile. When Kiran returned upstairs, Rain was still sleeping soundly and Snow was not in the room for the time being. He sat in the office waiting for the clock to strike 6. It was already 5:50 in the evening, but Snow had not yet returned. Kiran rose to his feet and glanced downstairs. Xander Corporation's employees were beginning to leave work, one after another. A dozen luxury cars were parked on the roadside in front of the office building, but no one got out. Kiran knew that those who had received the news from Serena had all arrived and were hiding in their cars, observing secretly. Chapter 175. The corners of his mouth curved and he murmured to himself, I'll shatter the 3 big families' 20-year glory bit by bit. He turned around and headed downstairs. At that moment, 3 black Rolls-Royce Phantoms were cruising on the road, heading toward the building. The first car was occupied by Alfred Ziegler, the second by Henry Quinn, and the third by Theodore Marsh. The 3 of them sat in their cars with grave expressions. Their apprehension was not only because they were delivering money to Kiran. What was worse, they had heard that he had spread the news. If the word got out, they would be humiliated before they even show up. The security guard at the gates was watching the employees get off work, enjoying his daily opportunity to ogle beautiful women. He was flustered when the 3 cars pulled up in front of the entrance, side by side. Although he had no idea who was in the cars, he could tell that they were very important people, and he immediately made his way over to the vehicles nervously and warily. The doors opened, and a bodyguard in a suit and tie stepped out of the passenger seat of each car. The security guard stopped in his tracks, alarmed. The 3 bodyguards marched to the front of each car and took their places there, their backs straight. At the scene, the Xander Group employees who were exiting the building also halted their steps or vehicles and glanced over. Those who had arrived in luxury cars after hearing the news wound down their windows to watch. The summer evening sun cast its fiery red glow on the black cars, rimming them with a golden color. The shadows of the 3 bodyguards' upright figures stretched out under the sun, giving them a commanding appearance. Announcing the arrival of the heads of the 3 big families. Just then, one of the bodyguards called out, "Woo!" The three of them stood straighter. The doors of the vehicles that accompanied the three cars flew open one after another. Dozens of bodyguards in similar suits trooped out and took their positions in front of the cars, forming a formidable wall around them. When the Xander Corporation employees heard that the visitors were the heads of the three big families, they could not help but cover their mouths and stare at the cars with awe and fear in their eyes. The security guard was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly, and he almost fell to his knees. The three big families were Bayville's law and order. They could determine a person's life or death with a single word. They were legends whose existences were greatly revered. Today, the heads of the three big families had gathered in front of the Xander Group building. Could it be that... Trepidation gripped the hearts of the onlookers. A bodyguard walked over to the passenger door of each of the three cars and opened the door. Then, they put their hands on the upper edge of the door to prevent the occupants from hitting their heads and respectfully invited the three patriarchs to come out. The grand scene was enough to strike fear into everyone present. The security guard swallowed hard and glanced in the direction of the building. He thought he should report the situation to Snow and Kiran, but his legs felt as heavy as lead. The Xander Corporation employees instinctively dispersed and made way for the patriarchs, as if welcoming their arrival. Alfred, Henry, and Theodore stood proudly at the entrance with grim faces. They looked more like they were here to collect a debt rather than offer money. Kiran's figure emerged leisurely from the building. He scanned the scene with a smug, mocking smile on his lips. Just as he was nearing the gates, a sudden gust of wind whooshed past him, followed by the clicking of a woman's heels running toward the entrance. Chapter 176. Susan Xander? As Kiran gazed after her, his pace slowed, but the curve of his lips increased. Susan approached the gates, her brows furrowing as she looked around at the dumbfounded employees. "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and get in line to welcome the heads of the three big families, huh?" Her reminder jolted the staff to their senses, and they hastily lined up and began to applaud. Susan hurried over to the three patriarchs and bowed, smiling in an ingratiating manner. "Welcome to Xander Corporation. I apologize for not coming out to meet you earlier." The three patriarchs were taken aback by her cordiality. Although they were there to deliver money, they had made their appearance in grand fashion to show everyone that the foundation and power of the three big families should not be underestimated. And surrendering to Kiran was just a temporary reconciliation. However, they had not expected Susan to be so respectful and polite. Didn't that mean the Xander family and Xander Corporation feared the three big families? In that case, Kiran's arrogance was only coming from his blindness and recklessness. As a pathetic remnant of the York family, his arrogance was groundless. Having arrived at that conclusion, the three patriarchs instantly regained their confidence and haughtiness. They seemed to have forgotten why they were there in the first place. Seeing that her invitation had no effect, Susan added anxiously, "Uncle Alfred, Uncle Henry, and Uncle Theodore, please follow me inside." When the three patriarchs noticed Kiran heading in their direction, they exchanged glances. The same solution popped into their minds. They would drive a wedge between the Xander family and Kiran, provoking Kiran's anger with the former. They remained standing proudly without saying a word. Flustered and at a loss, Susan took out her cell phone and called Snow. When the people waiting in the luxury cars saw Susan behaving so respectfully to the patriarchs, they immediately assumed they had been summoned there to witness the Xander family's surrender, which meant they had to play up to the three big families. At once, they scrambled out of their cars and fell over themselves to approach the three men. To Susan's dismay, Snow did not answer her call, and her distress only escalated when all the business leaders started crowding around. If she offended the three big families in front of these people, Xander Corporation could potentially lose all opportunities for business cooperation in Bayville and perish. She turned her gaze on the three patriarchs pleadingly. "If I may ask, what are you?" "They're here to beg for their lives," Kiran's voice sounded behind Susan. Beg for their lives? She felt like she had been electrocuted. Making such a grand entrance to beg for their lives? Was Kiran out of his mind? She whirled on him, disgust twisting her features. "Shut up! You have no right to speak. Get out of here!" The three family heads were delighted by her reproach. Their plan to sow discord was taking effect. It was perfect. They sneered at Kiran, fervently wishing he would deal Susan a fatal strike right away. Most of the business leaders had seen Kiran at the banquet. Although they were aware of his identity and formidable strength, they still regarded him with disdain. No matter how powerful he was, he could not possibly surpass the York family in its heyday. If the entire York family could be wiped out, why should they fear one man? He was just a lowly remnant. Having made their judgment, they approached the three patriarchs, bowing deferentially and greeting them. For a moment, the three men basked in praise and flattery as if they were distinguished guests. They were so engrossed in their elation that the purpose of their visit had already escaped their minds. Kiran scanned the crowd and located Marshall right away. A hint of emotional conflict flashed across Marshall's face, but it only lasted for a second before he joined the groveling horde. He already bore a grudge against Kiran for refusing to help him. Kiran was immensely disappointed. He knew that if the York family wanted to rise again in Bayville, the road ahead would be long and difficult. Therefore, he needed to be resolute and ruthless. Chapter 177. At that very moment, he decided that those business leaders were dead to him. Susan grew even more frantic at the crowd's reaction, especially when she thought of Kiran's conflict with the three big families. Once again, she yelled at him, "Get out of here right now, or else." Before she could finish, Kiran strode up to the three patriarchs, staring at them with a half-smile. He raised his wrist and glanced at his watch. 6 o'clock, right on time. "Now pay up. Pay up?" The throng of sycophants stared at the three heads in bewilderment. What did they need to pay for? Don't get too big for your britches, Kiran York. So what if you're a good fighter? Do you want to offend all these people in Bayville? Henry was the one who took humiliation the most poorly and the first to burst out. Alfred and Theodore remained quiet, but their expressions were just as furious. "Ha!" Chuckling, Kiran looked at Henry. "Have you decided to throw your life away now that Yvonne and Evelyn aren't here, old fart?" The insult reminded Henry of the redness and swelling on his cheek that had yet to fade completely, and he flew into a rage. "Kiran York, you've gone too far. You're just asking for death at this point." "I'm asking for death, huh?" Kiran repeated sarcastically. Henry nodded. "That's right, you." Smack! A loud and clear slap rang out, immediately cutting off Henry's next words. Henry's cheek swelled visibly and rapidly, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. His groveler's jaws dropped in shock. They had never expected that Kiran would resort to violence at the first instance of conflict. Moreover, he had hit the head of the Quinn family, one of the three big families. What would happen to CEOs of ordinary companies like them if they were in Henry's place? Susan could not help covering her mouth. The next second, however, she dashed up to Henry frenziedly, shielding him and jabbing a finger at Kiran. "Stop dragging the Xander family into your suicide attempts. You're not part of us. Besides, we have no intention of ending up like your family's wretched ghosts who couldn't even get a proper burial. We don't. If that's what you want, you can leave. The Xander family doesn't need you." Just then, Harold's voice came from beyond the crowd. It boomed with energy and authority. Susan was rooted to the spot. Kiran's fury instantly dissipated at the sound of Harold's voice. He was even slightly moved. The Xander family can give up its own children, but not the resolve to avenge the York family, Harold declared as he walked in, with Snow supporting him at his side. Kiran felt as if his heart had been touched in its softest spot. He could never repay the Xander family for persevering in their loyalty over the past 20 years. As long as the Xander family exists, the York family will not fall. Harold straightened his back and regarded everyone around him. "Kiran is the son-in-law of our family, a son-in-law more than we deserve." Boom. Everyone at the scene felt like they had been struck by lightning. Did the Xander family just say Kiran? A pathetic York family rat was more than it deserved. Sharp intakes of breath rippled through the onlookers. "Even if our family were to die in the streets without anyone to bury us, we would still be willing to share the same fate with the York family and Kiran." Once again, Harold's words astounded everyone. Susan was about to lose her mind. "Dad, Kiran, are you willing to marry Snow?" Harold interrupted her and asked Kiran, smiling. His kind smile stirred Kiran's heart like a gentle spring breeze. By making this plea, Harold was showing that the Xander family respected him and the York family. Kiran straightened his back and gazed at Snow. "Even if the seas run dry and the rocks melt with the sun, I, Kiran York, will protect Snow Xander with my life, for she is my wife." Chapter 178. Each word of his promise resounded through the place, its impact striking heavily on every heart. Snow felt infinite bliss and warmth bubble up inside her. At this moment, she recognized that she was the daughter-in-law of the York family. For 20 years, the York family's living and dead had no place to call home. Kiran and she were the only two people left in the York family. Even if the most severe trials awaited them, she was willing to stick by Kiran through thick and thin. "I love you." Holding back her tears, she said to him. She was the most beautiful woman in Bayville and the queen of many men's hearts. Now, she had found where her heart belonged. Kiran York, the man who had insisted on divorcing her, had fallen in love with her, and she with him too. She vowed to be with him until the end of her life without regret. She would fight alongside Kiran for the rise of the York family. She would take on every powerful enemy together with him. A brief silence descended on the scene following their confession. Clap! Somewhere in the crowd, Serena applauded enthusiastically, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. Clap! Clap! Xander Corporation's staff recovered from their shock and followed suit. On the other hand, Susan faded away awkwardly into the background. The setting sun hung in the sky like a fireball, dyeing the clouds red. However, it seemed more like the rising sun, which signified a new beginning, a promise to the souls of the York family's deceased who had wandered homelessly for 20 years. Ha ha ha. Harold laughed heartily, his eyes misty as he looked up at the sky. 20 years. For 20 years, your souls had no place to rest. I, Harold Xander, apologize for being unable to prevent that. Mr. Titus, I gave my granddaughter to your family. I hope she can play a role in carrying on your family lineage. The York family will eventually reclaim its position as the greatest family in Bayville. He stopped laughing, his cheeks streaked with tears. At that moment, all his suppressed agony was completely released. Snow covered her mouth, feeling as if her heart was being cut by a knife. For 20 years, her grandfather had led the Xander family in their arduous wait for the York family's return. For 20 years, his loyalty to the York family had never wavered despite the disappearance of his own son and daughter-in-law. He truly regarded himself as a member of the York family. She gazed at Kiran, tears welling up in her eyes. His chiseled, handsome face revealed the strength, determination, and indomitability of a man. This was her man. Her husband. Don't worry, Grandpa. As long as I'm here, the Xander family will stand strong, and the York family will not fall. Kiran's tone was calm yet emphatic. His eyes slid to Alfred, Henry, and Theodore. As if they had been penetrated by sharp swords, they could not help but take a few steps back instinctively. You will pay for the lives you took from the York family with your own, one by one. Kiran's voice was like the coldest Antarctic glacier, spearing their courage. They blanched, unable to utter a single word. Where's the live broadcast? It's starting now. Just then, Serena swung round to face the crowd and shouted, "Phwoo!" A swarm of reporters armed with all kinds of journalism equipment marched out and aimed their cameras and mics at the scene. Alfred, Henry, and Theodore were even more alarmed when they saw the staggering number of reporters around them. They felt as if they were being roasted on a fire. Initially, they had staged an intimidating, aggressive appearance to uphold their dignity for the last 2 days before their sneak attack. To their dismay, this only steeled Kiran's resolve to drive them into a corner and annihilate them. What shocked them the most was Harold showing up, after spending a long time away from the public eye due to his illness, just to openly announce the Xander family's lifelong alliance with the York family. Chapter 179. Although the Xander family was not as powerful as the three big families, there had been a mysterious force protecting them, allowing them to stand firm over the past 20 years. Before this, they had not understood why. Now, they knew. It was because the Xanders had been waiting for Kiran's return. Although the York family had collapsed, the Xander family's loyalty to them persevered. A horrifying thought suddenly occurred to the three of them. If they were ultimately killed by Kiran, would anyone in Bayville remember the three big families 20 years later? The dread of a possible shared demise began to grip their hearts. The other business leaders were caught in a dilemma. They could no longer leave as they pleased, but if they stayed, they would inevitably be embroiled in the ongoing dispute. The reporters had already finished preparing for the live broadcast and looked at Kiran and the patriarchs expectantly. Kiran turned to the three men. "Do you want to pay with money or your lives?" Their faces were contorted with indignation and fury. Kiran was really bent on humiliating them, especially now that they were on live broadcast. If they were filmed offering money in exchange for their lives, they would become disgraceful and useless scum in the eyes of their descendants. However, they did not dare imagine what Kiran would do if they refused to pay. "Kiran, we're on live broadcast now. You wouldn't dare kill us, would you?" Theodore asked, his beady eyes darting about. Snow glanced at Kiran anxiously as well, worried that he would act on impulse. After all, the current situation was different from the banquet. It was a crime to commit murder on live broadcast. Kiran smiled calmly. "I'll let you decide for yourselves." They were taken aback. Instead of giving them an answer, Kiran allowed them to make the decision themselves. What was the meaning of this? Alfred, Theodore, and Henry exchanged looks of confusion and bewilderment. Snow gazed at Kiran in perplexion as well. "You guys should go interview the heads of the 3 big families." "This is a rare opportunity, you know," Serena reminded the reporters. Kiran was satisfied. This woman was impressively capable of stirring up trouble, which was exactly what he needed right now. The reporters pointed their cameras at Alfred, Theodore, and Henry. Being in the spotlight did not give them any glory. On the contrary, it unnerved them. Theodore's eyes rolled about, and finally he said coldly, "Kiran York, we're here to tell you not to expect any money from us. We will never give you a single cent, not to mention $30 billion. In a flash, Alfred and Henry grasped what he was doing and secretly marveled at his cleverness. There was nothing Kiran could do in the current situation. He would not dare to kill them on a live broadcast. Both of them straightened their backs and regarded the reporters present. Kiran York demanded we pay $10 billion in exchange for a life. This is an outright threat, and we'll never succumb to it. They faced the cameras straight on and revealed the truth, attempting to thwart Kiran further by exposing him. Snow walked up to Kiran and took his arm, afraid that he would behave impetuously. To her surprise, he was unsettlingly composed. He glanced at the other business leaders. "Do you think Alfred, Theodore, and Henry will give me the money?" The CEO's teeth were practically chattering. The more they feared being involved, the deeper they were entangled in this mess. Alfred, Theodore, and Henry fixed them with smiles, which only alarmed them even more. It was a warning. Once again, the scene was plunged into silence. This was a battle of hearts and minds. This was a redistribution of power in Bayville. Now was the moment of choice. Chapter 180. Marshall was the first to move. Without a word, he took his place behind Alfred. His silent choice spoke volumes about his stance. The 3 big families, the Ziegler family in particular, were his first choice. Kiran eyed Marshall with cold derision. In the end, he was just a businessman who pursued profit, and the favor of saving his father was worth little in the face of money. Marshall did not avoid meeting Kiran's gaze. In fact, he stood up straighter. Alfred offered Marshall a gleeful smile. "Blooming Group will have Ziegler Corporation's full support from now on." A stand in exchange for support. Marshall was delighted. Even though Blooming Group was already worth billions, comparing it to the 3 big families was akin to comparing the light of a firefly to the stars in the vast sky. He said excitedly, "Thank you, Mr. Alfred." Alfred nodded with a smile and stood proudly with his hands behind his back. The Ziegler family was the most eminent of the 3 big families. Gone was the hesitation of the onlookers, and in its place was jealousy toward Marshall. There was a flurry of footsteps as they rushed to stand behind the 3 patriarchs. The 3 big families were their only choice. The frustration in Henry's chest vanished, and he cast Kiran a contemptuous look. "See? Sheer force cannot intimidate or conquer people's hearts. Bayville still belongs to us. The York family is a thing of the past." Beaming, Theodore turned to the people. "From now on, your company's business will be our family's business. You have our protection." The 3 heads were virtually bursting with confidence. Everyone rejoiced and chorused, "Thank you." Their cries echoed through the place with the force of a struck gong, much like a demonstration. Harold and Snow's faces fell. No matter how strong Kiran was, he was still unable to shake the status of the 3 prominent families. The corners of Kiran's mouth lifted into a collected smirk as he glanced at the 3. "Hand over the money now, or it'll be your lives." Their smiles instantly froze on their faces. They had already garnered the support of the whole crowd. Yet, He was still demanding money? They furrowed their brows and shot the cameras a look that indicated how much of an idiot Kiran was to them. Recognizing the opportunity to improve his impression, Marshall stepped forward, glaring at Kiran. "You're committing coercion and breaking the law on live broadcast. Aren't you afraid of being arrested?" Satisfied with Marshall's performance, the three patriarchs nodded in approval. This spurred the others to start ganging up on Kiran as well. "What, you're gonna trample on the law and kill us all now? Even if you kill us, we'll never yield to you. The three big families will not give you any money. In fact, we'll report you to the police and send you to jail." A wave of furious accusations permeated the air. The three patriarchs beamed with pleasure and pride. In their eyes, Kiran was nothing but a young, naive fool. Each family has to pay $50 billion now. To everyone's shock, Kiran raised 5 fingers and made another bewildering announcement. The three men's joy hitched in their chests. Wasn't Kiran afraid at all? $50 billion? They exclaimed after a long period of stunned silence, bafflement swimming in their eyes as if they had been struck by lightning. Or you can pay $30 billion plus a broken arm each. Kiran's gaze glided across their faces calmly. Feel free to choose. $30 billion plus a broken arm each? Alfred was utterly enraged. "Kiran York, have you gone mad with greed? What are you going to do with all that money? Offer it to your family's ghosts." Crack! He was interrupted by a clear snap of bones. "Arr!" A blood-curdling scream pierced the air. Everyone whipped around and saw Alfred clutching his left arm with his right, his aged features distorted in agony and horror. His left arm had been broken. There was a moment of shock, then silence. Kiran stood with his hands behind his back, his expression perfectly composed as if he had not just committed an act of violence.